And see.
Hey everybody, welcome back to this week's Mom and Pop Comics Talk. We're your comics parents, Wendy and
Tyler.
Chin Tanner,
Mm-hmm.
and we are with A Wave Blue World, which we founded 15 years ago. We talk everything on this show about everything from co-publishing to co-parenting and everything in between. Thanks for tuning in to episode 8, which is our second in our retailer roundup series. And tonight we have a very special guest, our friend Katie Pryde, who is the proprietor of Books with Pictures in Portland, Oregon.
All right, let's bring her on. And here we are.
Hi, guys.
Hi, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Super happy to be here.
Yeah, we're excited. As we alluded to, so we actually knew each other for a little bit before you even opened Books with Pictures. And we were able, much like Jean, who we had on the last show, we were able to see the opening of the store and coming to life. But before we get into that, shall we get into how we met? And that's a story of the two of you. So
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Well, we met very soon after Tyler and I moved from London to Portland, Oregon. And, as some of our viewers may or may not know, I am also a poet and author. So I applied for a job as a poetry editor on a new literary magazine called Stealing Time in Portland, Oregon, when we first moved, thinking that that would be a good way to start building community. And that's how I met Katie, because she was the managing editor of Stealing Time. And that was, I think, in 2012 that we met.
Yeah, it has to have been just about 10 years ago, because my youngest was an infant at the time, and she just had her 10th birthday.
Yes,
so
exactly.
Right in there. So I had just co-founded that literary magazine. It's like, I guess, two iterations of self ago, 2.5. It's just a while ago.
Yeah.
You and I bonded in part because we were both fleeing academics.
That's right.
I was actually in the midst of, or maybe had just submitted my withdrawal letter to my PhD program that I had decided I was not going to finish, which, as you know, is trauma. And then I met you, and you were like, I am also a PhD.
Refugee.
Searching for the right
refugee.
Yeah, basically. We were able to bond over that. It was
and kind of adjacent fields too. Yeah, so I was sociology, and
okay.
And you were history, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and similar interests, similar intellectual interests, and similar creative interests.
Yeah, and so the magazine didn't go as I think either of us would have liked it to long term, but we've got each other out of it, and actually a few other really good pals. So
that's right, and we got to hang out, weekly. I think we had weekly meetings in person, which is kind of wild these days. Yes, in your yard sometimes, in your house sometimes, and also in that really cute cafe in the southeast.
Yep.
Yeah, with the good sandwiches.
Under new management, but survived COVID, so I'm very proud of them. I hope they do okay.
Yeah. And then you opened your amazing store.
So you guys went from PhDs to literary magazine, and now you're both full-fledged into comics. So.
Well, and I took a long diversion through tech too.
That's right, you did, yeah.
There's, it was a couple years with the magazine, and then 4 years with Incune, which was the tech consultancy that I was running with my friend Alana. And the best things about that job were getting to work with Alana, because she's a phenomenal business partner, and that it was very lucrative, so I could pay my mortgage and save money and spend it all eventually on comic books.
Mm-hmm. Nice.
So I had the tech detour, which it pays better than literary magazining.
All of it, yeah.
I somehow forgot about that. I think because it goes so over my head. I'm like, oh, Katie is doing something in tech, which I completely don't understand, but that is very awesome.
I didn't
Good.
even
Yeah.
realize there were 4 years in there. I was like, oh my God,
Yeah.
where time goes that
Well,
fast.
Yeah.
we had a baby. That's what
Yeah,
You
yeah.
happened.
did.
Well, we
You
were
Yeah.
had a
having,
baby.
yeah. So, wow. All right. So, take us to deciding to start your own comic shop and get into that field.
Right. So it was, I was in this tech job, and we had sort of mutually decided we were done with the company. She wanted to have another baby. Some of our clients were being really, really difficult. There was stress and conflict between us. We're very old friends. And so we decided we needed to be done with this stressful company that we were running. Um, but we had enough projects in flight. We had enough sort of lookout that we had like 7 months
Hmm.
of we know we are ending this company, but we will continue to run this company for the next 7 months. Which meant that I had lots of time to like make lists about what kind of job I wanted to have and work on business plans and do that in my time between my mostly remote tech job.
Hmm.
Um, and so at that point in time, by kind of by accident, a lot of my Portland friends, like the majority of my Portland friends, had become comics people, people who worked at Dark Horse, people who were artists and writers and journalists. And I just had this like critical mass of comics people, so that when I was out socially, I was always talking about comics and like I was reading comics. But I also just had all these comics people in my world, um, and spent a lot of time. Well, we were, let's see, it was 2016. We were spending a lot of time talking and thinking about um, the misogynist online movement, which shall not be named
Okay.
for fear of
All right.
sundering it.
Yeah.
Right.
And yeah, so we spent a lot of time being very frustrated with the volume of their voice.
Mm.
Hmm.
And being told often when we pushed back, when we talked about why publishing decisions were being made, often the answer was, well, the actual audience for comic books isn't comics readers, it's comic shop owners. You can only make the comic books that comic shop owners sell
Hmm.
and or that comic shop owners will buy. And as you know, all comic shops are owned by
Men.
boomer white men.
Mm-hmm.
And so there will never be a market for these more diverse books that you want to see because we can't sell them to boomer white men. And so there's nothing to be done. It's sort of the story of the industry at that point in time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so there were all sorts of interesting things happening, on, I guess there was no Patreon quite yet, but on Kickstarter and on webcomics and other places. But inside of something like Marvel, we were still, it was bad times. And so, but Squirrel Girl was getting started and Squirrel Girl was great. And so there was this sort of, what they were calling the all new, all different line in Marvel felt very promising. In any case, me and actually a handful of other people simultaneous to me. So Amalgam Comics in Philadelphia was coming up and running at exactly the same time, but we didn't know each other. And some other shops were like, well, doesn't need to be all old white dudes, and getting shops off the ground. And so I sort of, sat down with my budget and my funding and worked out whether I could start a comic shop, and wrote a long business plan and got it off the ground. And yeah, so that was sort of the starting out point. Was really wanting to, really political is, I guess, is the word. Really feeling explicitly political about the way that I wanted to have a voice in the industry, and wanting to have a presence in the industry and wanting to offer that community space for the people in Portland who I really felt didn't have the kind of community space that I was wanting to have for myself and that I was wanting to create. So.
Right. Yeah, that's what I felt when you created. You're really creating a new space for a comic shop, right? Because you'll have the spectrum, and Portland had some comic shops, and for the most part, I mean, they were the white men, but I feel like it was a fairly progressive um, thing. But the comic shops still felt like the old world kind of comic shops, and this was the first, like the space, and you can talk about like the whether it was the space that you chose or how you chose to decorate it just felt more welcoming to people who weren't old world comic book readers or the traditional
I
audience.
thought it was particularly welcoming to children and
Hmm.
to women
Yeah.
Yeah.
and to children who are girls.
Yeah, and I do want to say explicitly that the oldest comic shop in Portland is also run by a woman. Her
Yeah.
name's Debbie Smith. She's
Hmm.
great. But it is, which is Excalibur. It's like a
Right.
mile from
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. You guys are pretty close.
And Debbie and I mean, we chat pretty
Hmm.
regularly. We call each other when we're missing a book for a customer, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Um, but her shop is very much, I mean, it's the oldest comic shop in Portland, and it feels like an old school comic shop.
Mm-hmm.
And she.
And sort of the mission there is having tons of back issues, having, a little bit of everything. There's less curation than I do, and more like just stock, a huge variety of a little bit of this, a little bit of that.
Yeah.
Whereas I curate pretty tightly. Actually, one of my moments on the design side was realizing how visually overwhelming I find most comic shops, that there's just a ton of stuff. There's posters, there's standees, there's toys, there's just comics often layered on top of each other, so you see a little bit of a lot of covers, sort of as they stand on a display rack. And add to that that a lot of the art that's on display, either on the fronts of comics or on the giant posters, or heaven forbid on the standee, are pretty objectifying toward women, or very violent. And so there's this sense of like not just visual overwhelm, but explicitly things that I would rather not be seeing, that I have to like blinder out to go into a typical comic shop and have the time that I want to have. And so there was really a focus on, from the design stage forward, of making a space that was more visually calm than that, which I think is part of why the space feels good for kids and good for new readers.
Yeah.
And really just sort of just calmer from a sensory perspective.
I think it's very interesting to watch children, in particular, children who are smaller and maybe even pre-readers, navigate the space of your store. Like I've watched Lucy in your space multiple times, and it's interesting that, she usually hangs back in stores, but in yours she just goes off and she looks around, and it's very intuitive. It's like you've mapped your space in such a way that there's real ease and navigability to it.
Yeah, I do really enjoy, and that's, it's something I'm mindful about. I want to make sure that the things that are for children are accessible from a child's point of view.
Yes.
And obviously, the shelves are not all in reach of kids, because I need, to use the vertical space. But one of the things I love that's pretty regular is that a family will come in, the parent will come sort of, boldly up to the desk and be like, "Where are the books for kids?" And the answer is like, your child has already found it.
Yes,
Like, they are
exactly.
already there. You came to talk to me because you thought you needed help, but the kid didn't need help. They're already, digging into it. So yeah, and that's and the way we're designed now, in our new building, so we moved 2 years ago. The question that people most often need navigation with is actually, where are the single issues, which is intentional. The single issues are toward the back. So the first shelves at the front are standalone graphic novels, like literary graphic novels and nonfiction. And so if you come in and you just like walk in and start browsing, those are that you're going to find graphic nonfiction, you're going to find the literary graphic novels, you're going to find the new releases. Kids section is after that. But if you're in for the newest copy of Wolverine, that's actually all the way at the back, because if that's what you're here for, you don't mind going to the back of the shop to get it. But if you don't know what you're here for, you're probably not here for the latest Wolverine issue. So it's, it makes more sense to have that toward the back, and to have the browser friendly things, like, honestly, like the nonfiction books, history and politics and memoir, are the things that random browsers, especially if they're, women who think they don't like comic books, very often that's what they pick up. So yeah.
Or people searching for gifts.
Totally, absolutely. or people who are browsing while their kids pick something out.
Yeah.
That's often a good space for them. Um, and there's a lot of really interesting um, political books, civics books. First Second is doing this line of nonfiction books that are literally just a civics textbook series
Cool.
that are really cool.
We might pick that up for Maddie.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, they're too big for, well, no, Matt, they're big enough for Maddie.
She's 14. Yeah.
Yeah.
Does that
But
blow
they're
your
definitely
mind? She was
for
5
like,
when you met her.
they're definitely for a like high school to adult audience. They're not kids books, which
Yeah.
was surprising to me. When I saw them marketed, I thought they were kids books, and they're not. Which is cool because it's, you know, it's not like we've got a robust civics education program in our schools right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of older kids, or you know, junior high, high school, that still want to read books that maybe is relevant for their school or not. Yeah. So yeah.
Right. And maybe they read John Lewis's March and they want to read something else that's, you know, similarly inspiring. And these books kind of hit that spot.
Yeah, Maddie just read the March trilogy. She read all 3 of them. So
the next one comes out next week.
Oh, is it coming out? Oh, cool.
Good.
Yeah. Called Run.
Yes. I've had the ash can on my spinner rack there for a few years now. Yeah. I'm excited for that one. So neat. So you'd mentioned moving to your new spa, which, you know, unfortunately we haven't been able to see yet.
No,
I'm really excited to hopefully someday get out there and see it. Tell us a little bit about that move. You had a good space, but you were renting it, and now it's quite different where you're going now.
So I mean, it's definitely you know, it was a complicated sort of personal life period of my life, as well as a complicated business period. So I was getting divorced. I couldn't get a mortgage on, like, I got the house in the divorce, but I couldn't get a mortgage for the house. So I only sort of had the house. And was like literally had put in a job application for a full-time job for the city that morning in the fall of, I guess, 2018. And then was like replacing the shop computer, and it needed to go to the repair shop. And so I was like stressed out. Like, I just put in this job application for a job I needed to keep my house, and was then stomping up the street to go pick up this computer that needed to go get fixed. And the owner of the building we're in now, who's this man about my age, who I've known often, I mean, we've lived in the same neighborhood for a decade, sort of came up beside me. He's very, very tall. And he put his arm sort of around the top of my shoulder in that way that very tall people can do to you. Like, it was this very sort of like this. As I was walking down the street, he said, "I need to talk to you about the building. We're selling it. I think you should buy it." And I was like, "I think I should too. How much do you want for it?" And he was like, "It's $1.5 million." I was like, I don't have that. I have a house I need to sell. And I don't know. And I was like, there's no possible way I can get financing for that. But, you know, thanks for letting me know. Give me your number, give me your realtor's information. And I went home and didn't get the computer fixed. I immediately got all of my business friends on the phone and were like, "How am I buying this building? What are we doing?" We sat down and made these huge lists of what are the different avenues we have to finance this thing. And what we wound up doing was starting a separate partnership from the bookstore. That's LLC with, it wound up being 22 members.
Wow.
And everybody bought in for somewhere between $10,000 and $80,000. Including me, although for me at the time it was part cash and mostly my house as collateral. And once I sell this house, then I can put in the rest of the money to buy this building. So there were so much lawyers involved. I learned so much about unsecured investments and weird large partnership law. And, you know, every state has different law around investors. and somebody wanted to invest in Germany, and I spent like a week trying to figure out what the laws around foreign investors in
Mm.
I'm really glad that that didn't go through. That would have
Okay,
made my
yeah.
taxes really difficult. But
Yeah,
basically, I
tax
feel like
issues.
I got an MBA.
Mhm.
I actually, my first lawyer quit because she was like, "This is outside of my wheelhouse, and I actually can't do this. Like,
Right.
you need to find a bigger lawyer."
Yeah.
Um, so that was this amazing span of months of both business wrangling, of trying to pull the money together, and negotiating on the building, which um, is falling apart. And so, what repairs were they going to make? What repairs were we going to discount the building for? What repairs are just my problem? So that was months of negotiations. I think it was probably October, started in October and we signed in February.
Mhm.
Um,
Of
and
2019.
we started working on it in October 2018 and signed in February 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Mhm.
And then gutted and remodeled
Right.
the building. Had to fully replace the sewer line because there was no functional sewer line. They like kept trying to scope it and they couldn't get the scope through all the way to city sewer. And they're like, we don't know where it goes. And I was like, I think it's that green lawn that the neighbors have, that really green patch. That's where the sewer line goes.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was demolished. So new sewer line. We completely replumbed the building. We did a bunch of electrical upgrades. We completely gutted and replaced the store bathroom because it was a closet.
Mhm.
And so we redid that for accessibility. Um, just a ton of work on the space, really pretty fast. So we signed in
Mm.
February, and we moved in June.
Okay.
Wow.
And between signing in February and June, we also ran a Kickstarter campaign. And the Kickstarter campaign was about funding the sort of what you would consider tenant finish on the store. So the new fixtures for the bookstore and the rebuilding the bathroom was a tenant finish job.
Mm-hmm.
So the things that we funded,
Mhm.
there were the parts that I funded with my 22 investors, and then there were parts that we funded with the crowd fund,
Yeah.
which raised about $40,000
Mhm.
on the crowd fund side.
What were the kinds of
Um,
incentives
um,
in your Kickstarter campaign?
We got the big grab bag.
Yeah, we
I don't know.
we
did.
got a
Yeah.
big grab bag. So
Bags
we,
and pins and stuff. Sorry, I let you go, but I
yeah,
remember
no,
we got it.
that's
Yeah,
So
we did.
great.
Yeah.
We
yeah.
had really cute tote bags and pins made, and those were nice. Those were donated art assets, and then we
Mhm.
just paid for the production on them.
Right.
So the pin was made by Corey Bing, who's a local artist, who does mostly like great monster stories, and then it has like does pins of all of her monsters. I
Mhm.
love them, and they sell really well at cons. And I was like, can you design us a pin? So Corey made a pin. Um, an anonymous artist donated the art for the tote bags. Actually, I'm not allowed to say who did that.
Oh,
It's
okay.
secret. Um, and um, and then we also had a line of prints where a bunch of different artists, including two of our staff members, did full color art for art prints that were part of the Kickstarter campaign. A bunch of different publishers just sort of threw us a grab bag of books that we could give away as part of the Kickstarter campaign. So we did stuffed tote bags, was a pretty big thing where it was just like you get a tote bag that will be full of books.
Mhm.
I don't know what
That's a
books they'll
nice
be,
idea.
but the
Yeah.
books that we have. Um, and then we also, there were some like higher end things like Kelly Sue DeConnick put in a custom painted denim jacket. You bring her a denim jacket and she will paint the back piece for you.
Mhm.
And she also gave us like a nice big bag of merch that was specifically tied to her and signed. There were a bunch of pieces of original art that were donated, including my favorite is that Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen just won an Eisner Award last weekend.
Oh.
There is a sequence at the beginning of Superman's pal Jimmy Olsen, like the first issue, where Jimmy Olsen wakes up married to this cat burglar who winds up being an alien, and things happen.
Okay.
But in the original conception of that first issue, and in the original art that got drawn for the first issue, that was Catwoman. Jimmy Olsen wakes up married to Catwoman, and then hijinks ensue. And Matt and Steve got through that first issue, submitted it like done, and got told that we're doing other things with Selena right now. You can't have her.
Oh, wow.
Sorry,
Oh.
that can't be Catwoman. Catwoman has her own book. She's over here and she's doing something. Change it.
Yeah.
And so, you put it in digitally and you give her a different costume design, and it's fine. It's no longer Catwoman. But Steve donated the version of that page that is Catwoman
Yeah.
to the Kickstarter.
That's
So
awesome.
whoever got that has a lovely piece of never published Steve Lieber original art, and I wish I had it, but congratulations to the lucky winner.
Yeah. Yeah. That's great. That's a great story too, which always helps with the original artwork.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So of now, Eisner Award-winning artwork, but not that one
Yeah.
because it's definitely not Catwoman.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I guess 2020, COVID.
So yeah, so
Tell
we,
us the
we
story of
moved
that.
in. We moved in June. My friend Becky Hawkins, who draws Super Butch, um, she does a diary comic that's watercolor postcards, and it's adorable, and it's about her and her shoulder angel, who like is a little angel that sits on her shoulder and critiques her life. um, and she did one of coming and helping us work on the store, so like everybody's in painter overalls and sanding things and working with tools, and she had this lovely portrait of that moment. And what's interesting about it is that it reminds me um, that that was Pride weekend. And normally we would have had a Pride booth, but because of the scheduling of the move, I wound up canceling our Pride booth in 2019, so that we could be moving that month. And um, and so the cartoon is me saying thank you so much for coming out, especially on Pride weekend, and all of these sort of butch ladies being like, it seems like something they do in Dykes to watch out for. And Shoulder Angel critiques that we're all even wearing the right outfits because Shoulder Angel's a bitch. But in any case, yeah, so we moved end of June, after spending our Pride month sanding things. And then, we're nice and settled in through the holiday season and sort of survived the holiday season, and then took that deep breath that you take in retail in mid-January when like all of the gift certificates are spent and you can sit down and figure out what just happened because you don't breathe for 6 weeks during Christmas. And I made a good list of what we were going to do. And it was going to be a big growth year for us, 2020, because we'd just gotten finally settled, and like I'd been through all of these crises right on top of each other, but like now it was fine. Mid-February, Comics Pro, which is the annual comics retailers conference, met in Portland in mid-February of 2019. We're all like, or of 2020, and we're all like watching on the horizon, like some people are saying not to fly. Should we not be flying? Well, all of us flew here. Like sort of that moment of murmurs of like something's going wrong, but it's probably fine, right? Had a super productive weekend, learned a ton, networked with all of my pals. And then by the first week of March, we were talking about this is a crisis. And by the third week of March, we were doors locked.
That's right.
And so, the first thing we didn't do was Emerald City Comic Con.
Yeah.
And then I was also like supposed to be hosting screening of Barbed Wire at the Hollywood Theater that month,
really?
as part of my ongoing series of campy female-led comic book movies at the Hollywood, which we will return to someday. But like that got canceled, and then everything was canceled. Right?
Yeah. So then how did the store, how did you and the store survive COVID? Because it's not over yet, but you have come out the other side of that closure, and things seem to be going
I'm
well.
actually really, really proud about it. We did very well. We actually did wind up having a growth year is strong. I think we grew 5%, but we still grew at the end of 2020, which is
that's extraordinary.
The other thing that I'm really proud of, so we locked the doors actually a couple days early for the actual closure order. I was sort of seeing it coming and just needed to protect my people. All of my staff had either like their own medical issues or immunocompromised people at home, and there was lots of reason to be concerned.
Yeah.
And so I sort of made the call a couple days early, closed the doors, told everybody not to come in. Um, and with all the confidence in the world, so don't worry, I'll keep paying you through we shut down a couple weeks, it's fine, everybody gets paid, don't worry about it. And then I sort of put up some very rough online forms. We didn't have a full online store, but I put up some Google forms, and I put up two different Google forms. One was if you already know what you want, or if you just want your subscription box delivered, fill out this form and I will send you an invoice and I'll bring those books to you. If you don't know what you want, but you would like me to do personal shopping for you, let me know how much you want to spend and what kind of thing you want, and I will be your shopper in the store. And those both wound up being really successful. So simultaneously, like there were some really sweet things in that time. A handful of sort of comics people, like comics artists and writers, started like buying from a different shop's web store every week. So like I did a couple of big orders for Matt Rosenberg where he was just like, I'm spending $100 with you guys this week. Like, what do you want to send me? Teeny Howard put in some really big orders. So there was that nice feeling of like support from creatives in the industry, which was great. There were a couple of interesting initiatives from the publisher side. TKO just sent us a check every time one of our customers bought a book from their web store.
Wow.
That was like, one of your customers bought a $20 book, here's $10 every time. Like, and that's their whole margin.
Yeah.
Or that's if I were wholesaling from them, that would be my margin. And they did that for I think 4 months, which was lovely. So all sorts of interesting stuff like that going on all at once. As well as the actual government program. So we did get a payroll protection program grant, or forgivable loan, and we also did get a large, for me, although small by the scale of these things, small business loan. So what all of that amounts to is there were 2 months where the doors were locked and nobody came in. At which point I realized that Nick, who works with me, who has worked with me since I opened, I have seen every day for the last 5 years, except for those 2 months. And I did not realize like my emotional dependence on Nick until he was gone for 2 months. I missed him very much. Sorry, there's a shiny thing over my face, and like as the sun is setting, it's getting very interesting here. I'll take it down if it's too distracting.
No, not on this end.
Just glitter.
Yeah, we're seeing a little bit of it, but that's fine. Yeah.
And but what's amazing is that with all of that support and with our customers really coming through and showing up and making orders, I was able to keep paying everybody. None of my people went on unemployment. Everybody got their regular payroll every week. And I'm really proud of that.
Yeah.
And we were able to just keep running. So there was that 2 month span. Well, our doors were locked. Diamond was also not shipping new product.
Right.
Which was interesting. We could get restock. There were no new books being released, which I still think was really the right call. I know it was a controversial call, but I think that between California not being able to do any business at all, they were so shut down, which is like something like 20% of the comic shops in this country are in California.
Oh, really?
Like a large number of retailers. And then additionally, my understanding was that their warehouse was really not, that it took them some time to get their warehouses up to speed to be running safely. And so that's a good reason to close too, is that there's just, if you can't safely operate as a business, you shouldn't be operating. So in any case, especially in that Diamond shutdown, it made the idea of personal shopping really, really valuable, because it meant that I could then shop my slow selling stuff, my weird backlist, my, that book that I love, but nobody ever picks up because the cover design isn't great. And I
Mhm.
could sell those
Mm-hmm.
and not have to be spending a ton on new inventory because people were trusting me to find them something good, even if it wasn't the thing that they would come in and pick out on their
Mm-hmm.
Right.
own. And so that was really good for cycling some old stock and for sort of getting through that period without really being unduly burdened by not having new single issue comics coming in.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real testament to hand selling and a testament to the fact that the store, the heart of the store is you. The heart of the store is your sensibility, your curation.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and that I've really developed a sense of trust in my customers,
Yeah.
which the both the trust of you pick out my books for me, I'm sure it'll be fine, and the trust of like everybody's afraid of everybody, but sure come to my door.
Yeah.
Like I really felt that very strongly of like these days where I'm not seeing other human beings except that I'm driving around the city for 2 hours every night,
Yeah.
Yeah.
leaving comics on people's porches.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah.
felt really good. It did feel really good.
Yeah.
Uh, there's one night where one of my regulars bought another one of my regulars a gift certificate.
Mm.
It was during the holidays. Everything was like Christmas lights and cold. Um, and the gift certificate was like, "Can you deliver it tonight to
Mm.
them?"
Yeah.
And so I drove out and knocked on the door, and they held up their quarantine baby in the window
Oh.
so that I had seen her. This baby who had been born in March, and so I hadn't like met her. And I hold everybody's babies. Like holding babies is my thing.
Mm.
And I hadn't held this baby, and they held her up in the window so that I could see her. And it was just like, oh, weird, weird COVID times, but
Mhm.
really very sweet.
Yeah, but that trust is really important, I think, like I can completely imagine, you know, trusting you, for example, because you are the person who taught me what to do when there was norovirus in my house, like I know about germ theory and
Oh
I
God,
do you remember that? But
I do remember
block it
that.
out. Um, no, but we also were really pleased to be able to offer shipping, for personal shipping from our own warehouse and from our own house. And somebody messaged me once on Facebook Messenger to say that they were buying some books, and they were like, "I trust you guys because I know you're a germaphobe." I was like,
Mm.
"Yes, I am. Yes,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
am."
Yeah, I mean, that's real. And, it was also when we did open the doors again, there were some interesting pieces of being at that point technically frontline that were just really strange that I feel like we're not. So we were still working really long hours. Not only Nick, my full time person, was able to come back customer facing. Everybody else was unable to take that risk. And so it was Nick and I being customer facing all day long, and everybody else doing mail order, doing shipping off hours, coming in at weird times so that they could keep stuff moving. Our hours were very short. Like we were open, I think, 4 hours a day for a few months.
Mm.
We only had like a limited selection available to browse, and everything else was like, we'll get it from the back for you,
Mhm.
so that there was less space to sanitize.
Mm,
But
right.
I was also like, I was so aware of my exposure. We didn't really have good numbers yet on how infections were moving. And so, like, I didn't see my parents,
Right.
right? Because, like, I can either do my job or I can be in a bubble with my parents, but I can't do my job and keep my parents safe.
Yeah.
So my parents live in town. They're like 2 miles from me. And I was going to like stand below their balcony and chat with them in the freezing cold.
Mhm.
um, or go for walks in parks.
Right.
But I was otherwise like really not seeing them at all. And so that was intense. It was
Yeah.
Yeah.
intense. I'm very glad that we're all vaccinated now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
Yeah.
some of us are. I mean, hopefully most of us are.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know how much concern about the Delta variant there is in Portland. There's plenty here for sure.
yeah, no, for sure here as well. And I'm proud of Portland, like where we are now. I think it's 65% of adult Portlanders are fully
Oh, that's
vaccinated.
great.
Our positivity rate is currently 1% on test positivity. And our infection infections as of today are 8 per 100,000. So we are among the very lowest counties in the
Yeah,
state.
that's excellent.
And I am proud of Portland for that. But also, you drive around the city on a Saturday night and it sure looks like we're not going to be there in 2 weeks. So, the breakthrough infections are definitely a concern. Delta virus stuff is definitely a concern. And at this point, I was reading, I did a big Promethea reread the other day, the Alan Moore sort of weird magic manual book. And right at the beginning, like issue one of the setting, like exposition moments of the setting is a broadcast, news broadcast. And the news broadcast gives the weather, the traffic, and the viral load.
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Yeah. That was, that was one of the first books that I read when that Tyler assigned to me 18 years ago when we first met. I loved it. I mean, it really,
I'm very, very fond of it.
Yeah.
And it is, it's so expository, like not just it's so didactic, right? It like forgets that it's telling a story half the time because Uncle Alan needs to teach you about how magic works. Which I don't mind. Uncle Alan can teach me anything as long as J.H. Williams is drawing it, and I am there. But it's a weird comic. I can totally imagine being a retailer and being just really annoyed with that second arc because the readership felt like a brick.
Oh, really? Huh?
Because nothing was happening. And in any case, that sense of like in the future you will watch viruses like the weather. In 1999,
it's very prescient
fiction. And now I literally wake up in the morning and check the weather and check the virus report.
That's right.
So yeah.
So do you think, do we have our new protocols and this is just how the way it's going to be for a while? Do you predict changes, better or worse?
It's tricky right now. I mean, I feel like we are at one of those sort of transition moments right now with what's going on with Delta. I heard a bunch of chatter on the news just yesterday about boosters, which I hadn't heard nearly as much chatter about before yesterday. And just the idea that part of the reason that the rates are rising quite so much right now is because everybody who got vaccinated in March is losing immunity now. That's very troubling.
Interesting.
And how well the vaccine works is kind of the critical question, right? Do we have a working vaccine or don't we? What's the virus doing to bob and weave around the vaccine that may or may not be working? A month ago, I would have said that I thought we were really coming out of it, and looking at the numbers now, I don't, and that sucks.
Yeah.
Especially since Free Comic Book Day is August 14th.
Yeah.
In 2 weeks.
Yeah. And also with the impending, New York Comic Con and, all the conventions that are going to start up again. I mean,
and Rose City here
is going to do one in December, right? November, December?
No, Emerald City is scheduled for December. I don't know what I'm doing about that, but Rose City is in September.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. Are you going to that one?
I have a ticket.
Yeah.
I haven't accepted any invitations to do programming or anything, so I'm not obligated to be there. And I do feel very on the fence about it.
Yeah.
That's how I feel with New York Comic Con. I didn't get a booth, but I got my professional badge, and now I'm not even sure I'm going to be using that.
Yeah, like I've got my Rose City Pro Pass, and we are planning some outdoor after party activities. So, but depending on what the next 2 weeks look like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, we're in the same boat as you, with one child who is unvaccinated because they're as yet ineligible, so that's a factor.
Right, both my kids are too young.
Oh, is that right? I didn't realize that.
Jasper turns 12 in November.
Oh, I thought he was already 12. Yeah.
So neither of my kids are vaccinated.
Right.
And we've never stopped requiring masks in the shop. There's just no reason to. So many of our clients are kids that it felt absurd to lift the mask requirement when there's still I recognize that it's possible to be an adult and live an adult life that never brings you in contact with children.
Mhm.
But the way that the conversation has just written off children under 12 as like part of civil society has
Yeah,
been very, very weird.
it's very disturbing.
Um, and So anyway, around here, children are a critical part of the humans that we
Mhm.
interact with every day, and so everybody can keep wearing a mask, thanks. And we've gotten, we get pushback every now and again, sometimes very aggressive pushback,
Hmm.
but
How do you handle that?
we invite people to leave. I mean,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
we have masks by the door. You're welcome to take one. They're actually very nice masks that we have in stock right now. You can take one for free, and if you don't want to wear it, you can leave.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I had one pretty violent run in, but honestly, masks was not the worst of that guy's troubles. Like masks is where our confrontation happened, but he
Yeah.
was having a meltdown day, regardless of whether masks was the request he didn't like.
I see.
And then Nick got actually yelled at pretty recently by somebody who just, well, I mean, I think similarly was less out of it. I mean, my guy was she was just hot and angry, and somebody told her to do something she didn't want to do. I mean, to be specific, a black man told her to do something she didn't want to do, and so she responded to that by having a tantrum. And but you just invite them repeatedly to leave, and then eventually they do. Maybe they write you a mean Yelp review, and that's
Mm-hmm.
fine.
Right.
Um, so but we also we are planning a free comic book day event.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
um, and are trying to be very mindful about it. We have some guests signing in tents in the parking lot.
Great.
We have right now are planning a kids craft table also in the parking lot, and that's my one that's like, if that rate goes over 1%, we will probably nix the kids craft table.
Because all the touching.
Instead of having people pick out books off a table, which is we usually have all the books out in trays, and people pick from this long row of all the different free books out in trays. This year we're packaging them up into packs of 3. Everybody gets one pack of 3, and they can choose off a menu
Okay.
which 3 books they want,
Yeah.
and then get that already sealed up for them, so there's not the sort of long browsing shoulder to shoulder in line and picking up the books you want. Instead, there's this more efficient, hopefully, sort of ticketing, and then here's the package you wanted system. And then we always have volunteers to monitor crowd flow and line management and how many bodies are in the store at once. And so we will have that as usual. It'll just be maintaining a well-spaced line and making sure there aren't too many, fewer people in the store at once, and giving people who don't want to come in and shop the option to just get their books outside and leave. So sort of strategies to reduce too many bodies at a time. But it does feel very weird to be running advertising to say, come to the shop on this day, where at the same time so much of my emphasis is but don't everybody come at once,
Right.
don't make a crowd.
And stay outside.
Yeah, exactly. You seem lovely, come back later.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. And presumably, because it was supposed to be in May, right? That's when they usually have it, and so I'm sure they were thinking August will be so much better. And
May was actually better.
Yeah.
I pushed back on it then. It was very obvious to me when they pushed it in, whatever, I guess it was in April, they announced that it was going to be in August, not May. Maybe before that. And I was just there's no way. There's no way this is going to be safe for a crowd. But at the same time, some of our signing guests, we have Ron Chen and Paul Tobin coming to sign Earth Boy. Earth Boy got released last year. It is a beautiful little book. They have done absolutely 0 events for it.
Oof.
Yeah.
And the idea of having a book, we have Robin Kaplan coming for No One Escapes the Enchanted Forest. Again, beautiful book, came out last month, absolutely deserves accolades and celebration, and has not had a single in-person event.
Right. Right.
And so one of the things that we do at the store is give people this opportunity to meet fans and be seen and be recognized. And I want that for them. It is such a lonely process, as you know, to make a book.
Yeah.
And there is something really important about being able to see the people who receive it from you on
Yeah.
the other side.
We've had no in-person events for Embodied, for example, but we've done as many virtual things as possible, and that's been interesting. It's gone relatively well. It helps that I'm kind of a hermit anyway.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we tried to incorporate stores. I mean, we did
Yeah.
work with, well, I guess they're not a physical store, but
Bookshop,
the bookshop, because you can still, that's where you had them
Bluebird
before.
Books.
And so if you kind of work with them, I don't know if you did that at all. Did you do any virtual with
I just don't
creators?
have the heart for it.
Yeah,
We did one virtual event because our actual staff member released her first book during
mm,
COVID.
yeah,
Um, so Sierra Miller put out Mason Mooney, Paranormal Investigator, which
mm,
is an adorable middle grade book about a mean little boy who wanted to investigate scary things, but he didn't like being scared, so he had his heart removed and put in a jar
mm, okay,
so that he could investigate ghosts. And it's about him. And like, it's a sibling book. It's about getting along with your sister, and they meet these like sibling ghosts. And it's lovely. It's really charming. Sierra wrote the whole thing, drew the whole thing, and then released it in, I want to say it was October of 2020. And so we did an online event for her. And we'll actually be hosting her for the sequel in October of this year, I hope,
okay.
in person outside. Um, so, yeah, but that's the only online event that we did. I feel like I never got my head around how I wanted them to run.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, depending on how this next wave goes, we'll see if we have to figure it out or if we can go back to doing in
Yeah.
person.
Well,
Yeah,
nonetheless, you're a great supporter of creators and small publishers like ourselves. We've benefited certainly from having an event at your store, and love
Yeah,
that you carry our books.
I saw Justin in the other day, found the stash of anthologies on my anthology shelf. I've got a lot of those from you guys. I think I have most of your in print books
oh,
in the
great.
store somewhere.
Uh-huh.
Um,
Yeah, that's
but
fantastic. Yeah. Well, and we would love to come and do next time we're able to get out there, maybe do one in the new space or,
yeah,
yeah.
absolutely.
Anyway,
Or,
well,
in the parking lot.
We're in the parking lot.
yeah, though I don't know if we'll fly, if we'll be making a flight in a time when like it's still a
Yeah,
concern. So that's me hoping that in a year or so this will be reduced to such a level that we can be traveling
gosh,
and
I
everything
hope
like
so.
that.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
miss traveling.
I can hope. Yeah. um, so outside of the whole COVID issue, we'll move away from that. How do you feel about the comic industry in general, where it's going with comic shops? I mean, people have predicted the death of comic shops. Numbers are good, but it's mostly graphic novels. Um, is that bookstores? Is that Amazon? I don't know. What do you feel about the state of what we're doing right now?
I feel pretty positive about it. Like, things are booming right now. There's actually a speculator boom right now
Oh yeah.
in sort of shades of 1994 sort of
Mm-hmm.
ways, which any comic shop owner who lived through that is having like actual trauma response
Yeah.
to. There's a speculator boom right now. Nobody wants a speculator boom on the retailer side. Definitely some folks are making a ton of money about it. Phil Boyle down in Florida just opened a new mega store like during COVID,
Mm-hmm.
because he is really riding this current wave of like getting big money for slabbed single issues. There's definitely people doing that,
Yep.
and some people are doing really well on it.
Mm-hmm.
And it is part of why comic shops on paper look like they're doing really well right now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to play that game at all. It is totally
Yeah.
uninteresting to me. It's not fun for me. It is not the part of this industry that I enjoy working with.
Mm-hmm.
It is some of the most frustrating customers I work with. So
Mm.
that's not what I do. It's not
Yeah.
what I'm about. Um, and I do a lot of work to cultivate a sort of a reader's audience. That's who I want to
Mm-hmm.
be working with by and large in the store. Um, and and I do feel like on the reader side, we're also having a boom. It just doesn't have that quite sort of look. It doesn't have the same look to it. It doesn't have the
Yeah.
same shape to it.
Steady
Um,
increase. That's been tough to measure because of COVID, and
Yeah.
But I think younger readers are coming in and reading comics and books.
100%. And you also now, so we're, just had the 10th anniversary of Smile, which is a huge
Mm,
deal. Raina Telgemeier's book that basically launched the middle grade market.
Mm.
Which means it's been 10 years, which means now I have young women come into the store and say things like, oh, I've been reading comics since I was a kid and I picked up Smile.
hmm
And they'll see Smile on the shelf and they'll have this nostalgic, like, oh, I used to love that.
hmm
And that's remarkable. Like, it is exactly the same sense of, let's say, 2005, when people are like, oh, I read manga when I was a kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's that moment, but we're having that with people who grew up on Reina and the army of people who came with her.
hmm
Um, and are now looking to move into sort of a more mature market. And that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Um, and so there's that audience to really be mindful about capturing, because they'll read other things. They'll read novels. They're not attached to
Right.
comics as a medium in the way that, like, I grew up on Batman and I need the next Batman, but folks are attached to the medium.
Right.
But they're definitely available to be captured. They're used to reading sequential, like, they're reading sequential art. This is a medium that means something to them. It's not that sense of like, I need to train you to be patient with a comic so that you can read a comic, which is a different set of readers.
Right.
People who are like, I only read novels. And you'll be like, but you will like Bitch Planet, but you're going to need to learn how to read a comic book to read Bitch Planet.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I mean, I feel like the store is doing very well. This year, 2021, we are having that growth year that I wanted to have in 2020. Like, we are explosively growing right now. It's so cool. I just hired a new person. Like, we have expanded our hours like repeatedly.
Okay.
So we're doing well. A lot of my sort of cohort of I don't know, everybody's got their like little closed group chats of whoever the retailers are that you actually talk to about your day. Most of the folks I'm in close communication with are doing really well.
Okay.
Bookstores are doing really well.
hmm
So I don't have a lot of blame for Amazon. I think that actually the pandemic, well, and the moonshot, are definitely both opportunities for sort of a greater public conversation about how much money do we actually want to be giving to Amazon.
Right.
And I feel like we've been telling that story for 20 years,
Yeah.
but it's hitting differently right now, which is great for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also been, I mean, it's been such a disruptive year on the retailer side. So during COVID, when Diamond shut down, DC Comics switched distributors.
Yeah.
And not just switched distributors, but like invented two new distributors that were actually just large retailers and said they were distributors, and we had to buy comics from them now, which wasn't my favorite thing.
Yeah.
But we all figured out how to make that work. Then one of those distributors went away, so everybody who was with the second distributor, now everybody's only with one distributor for DC Comics. Fine, we all figure out how to make that work. Then Marvel announces that they are also leaving Diamond Comics, but they're moving over to Penguin Random House, which for comics people feels like, ooh, weird book industry stuff. But for book industry people is like, they're the big dogs on the block, right? Like, Penguin Random House has already acquired everybody and their brother, and now they're distributing Marvel. Okay, fine. But unlike Lunar, which is the DC distributor, Penguin Random House, so Lunar on their data management side said, we will just do it exactly the way Diamond does. And then they don't. Their data is really, really buggy and messy and full of holes, but the intent is the data looks the same. Yeah. Penguin Random House says, actually, comics data is ridiculously formatted. We're going to format it the way book data is formatted, which means all of our software just broke. So it's been, and there's this sense of like layers and layers of these things that are on the back end that my customers don't need to know about. Like, this is not of interest to all but the nerdiest customers, but it does affect things like, how much time does it take me to make sure that the right number of people get X-Men every month? And I would say right now that time is doubled from where it was before. Just that back end ordering, subscription maintenance, like all of it is just harder. making sure the right books come into the store and go to the right people is just harder than it was 2 years ago. And so that's part of, like, I did need to bring in a new person because my work on the back end of just making the store run and the building now not fall down is so much of my time that I can't be customer facing as much as I used to be. So, you know, delegation was never my strongest suit, but I'm getting better at it.
Good. Good. And it's great to have a shop like Books with Pictures, you know, sticking around through this, because as you mentioned, you know, there's the speculator boom, but there's also a slower, like, growing market of readers who are here to actually read the books and to enjoy comics as well. Because I remember that time in the 90s, and it, you know, it had a negative effect in the long run.
Well, I mean, it
Yeah.
bankrupted Marvel, and it put something like a third of the shops in the country out of business. Like,
Yeah.
it was incredibly disruptive.
Yep.
And you know, I don't think either Marvel or the surviving shops want to do that again.
Yeah.
But then you see Marvel making like really short-sighted moves, and you're like, guys, do you not remember?
Yeah.
You actually went bankrupt.
Yep.
Like, you sold the X-Men. Like, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully we can prevent that this time around. I mean, I think we're in for a lot of different shifts and things like that, but, you know, eventually when that speculator boom ends, you know, we'll just have the readers again for a little while, and then I'm sure it'll cycle back again. But
it comes and goes.
yeah.
I mean, it's fine. And I think that a lot of it, there is a balance between sort of being aware of the larger market stuff because it is relevant to how I order and how people shop. And just really keeping my focus on what is in my sphere and in my control, which is what is happening inside the store.
Yeah.
And sort of, the employee manual says something to the effect of, like, inside the store, we pretend that is the world of comics that we want to be living in.
Oh, that's a nice way to put it.
We're not going to talk about how we wish there was better representation in comics when we're talking to customers in the store. We just show them the really great stuff that exists, as though those were the options, right?
Yeah.
We're gonna just not, we're curating. We don't have to carry the mountain of stuff that is crap. We can just show you what's good inside the store.
Yeah.
Outside the store is a different conversation.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Wow. Well, that's terrific. You know, like I was saying, Books with Pictures is an amazing store, and anybody gets a chance to visit, they definitely should. I know travel's a little limited, but you are having some events outside and everything. And we're certainly, you know, having major FOMO because we want to be able to go to some of these events and to see the shop and to see your new space, which looks beautiful.
Yeah, Maddie was the sketch artist at my first free comic book day.
That's
so,
right.
Oh my
you know,
God.
she's got to come back and sketch for me again.
Yeah, no, she would do that. I remember that. Yeah.
Well, she's been taking classes consistently online from the Kubert School. So, you know, she's definitely, you know, getting prepared for that big gig.
I have a honey badger of hers around here somewhere.
Oh my God.
The last time she was here. It's tucked in a sleeve, nice and safe.
Oh, cool. Yeah. Yeah, I hear from people who still have their sketch. So that's great because, you know, it was fun when she did it, but to see it years later too was really nice.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we'll get her out there for an event someday.
Yeah. Someday.
Excellent. Yeah.
It's so good to see you both.
So
yeah, it's really great to see you. Let us end the show and then we'll just chat real fast before you go.
Yeah.
We'll switch over and yeah, thank you so much for joining us. All right.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us for another episode of the Mom and Pop Comic Shop. Oh, we're talking to them right now. Yeah, thanks for joining us. And we've got another retailer roundup next week, Skate Pod Comics in Long Island. We'll have Manaham on, and we'll talk more comic shops and what's going on in them. And we hope you'll join us. So until next time.
Don't forget to wash your hands, brush your teeth, and read your comics.